Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to stately Vaughan Manor, where Roger and I have returned to talk about something serious. Yes, I will be getting rid of 1,000 books. I know, you saw the title for this video and thought, has madness descended upon stately Vaughan Manor? No, not really. But I am going to be getting rid of 1,000 books. Probably more than that. It will be more than that. I don't know how many more, but it will be more. And you're probably thinking, well, that's madness. Why would you do such a thing? Well, let me explain. Let's talk about books, the accumulation of books, collecting books, and getting rid of books. Let's just talk about this for a minute. So, a few months ago, I realized that I have too many books. I have too many books for the space that I have. I mean, I do live in a majestic, gigantic manor, but even a gigantic manor house such as this only has so much space. And I realized, you know, as soon as I looked over to some of the corners and I saw books piled in front of bookcases, that, you know what, that's too many. Once you have books piled up on the floor in front of bookcases, that's too many. So something needs to be done. And this situation was made more serious by some construction that happened that's been going on actually continuously here at the manor. It seems like forever. My mother-in-law moved into the manor, and for this to happen, we had to actually make more space. You know, we had construction and have had construction still going on, but we've had construction here at the manor forever just to make room. Because, I mean, you're like, but you've got a giant manor house. Yes, but, you know, she needs her own wing. And the servants' quarters had to be expanded. So, you know, there was construction for that. We had to physically make room for this other person to live in the house. And part of making room actually changed some things. Like, I used to have a room that was just a storeroom. It was full of books. It was full of, we called it the room of shame because it was just so full of junk. Like everything we just needed to stuff somewhere, we stuffed in this one room. And that included boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes of books. Well, that room is not a junk room anymore. It was transformed. That space was transformed, which means all of those boxes of books had to go somewhere else. And they were just kind of, things have been in disarray. So now that all the construction's coming to a close, and I actually have an idea about the actual physical space that I have, it's time to reconsider this idea. And I had talked about this before. I made a video about it, how I was going to have to unhaul all of these books. And that whole thing was stalled because of the 500 book challenge. This challenge, which is based on the 100 book challenge, or actually it's based on the Read What You Own challenge created by Criminali, which tops out at 100 books. I'm an idiot, so I decided to make it a 500 book challenge because I've got so many books. And as soon as I took up that challenge a few months ago, I'm like, you know what? Let's just put the getting rid of the books thing. Let's put that on hold. Let's worry about that later. I might need those books, you know, 500 book challenge. I have to read 500 books I own before I could buy any new ones. I might need all those books. It was my excuse not to have to deal with this. But now I've realized that I have to deal with it. For one thing, like I said, everything seems to be settling down here. I have an idea of the space that I have. And I've still got books piled in front of bookcases everywhere, and it's just, you know, it's time to actually do this. And so yeah, I'm going to do that. And so it's a tough thing getting rid of books. But I realized, yeah, it's time to do that. So it's time to make some decisions. And there are a lot of factors going into this. This could be something that I could just ignore. I could keep all of these books packed up and just store them away. I guess there is physical room to store them. Although then there's no room to store anything else. And I still have issues. But I could not do it. It would be possible not to do. But there are reasons that just doesn't really work. And not just aesthetic reasons. But, you know, I have to factor in things like how long I'm going to live. And I know some people are annoyed when you start talking about death and mortality. But, you know, tough. It's something you really have to think about. I am over 50 years old. And when you get over 50, you have to start realistically considering how long you might have left on the planet and how many books you're actually going to be reading. You know, if you're a reader, and what you will leave behind when you pass away. So this thing that happens to us as readers and book collectors, or collectors of any kind actually, after we pass away is our collection, you know, it has to be dealt with, right? Whoever is left behind suddenly has to deal with all of this stuff that you have left behind. And so it's at the point, you know, in my life, because of my age, where I have to think about that. You know, what kind of mess am I going to leave behind? How much stuff am I going to leave behind that has to be dealt with by other people? And I have so many books that I don't actually need that I probably should just take care of it now. And so this means making some hard decisions, right? What is going to stay and what is going to go? And I think I've got it worked out for the most part. And that's how I know the number of books that will be leaving. So what is going to stay and what is going to go? What is definitely staying are, for example, the vintage science fiction books that I own. Pretty much any book that would be difficult to replace if I wanted to read it, I'm going to keep. And since I love all those vintage science fiction books, I'm going to keep all of them. And that's a lot of books. So I'm going to keep all of those. I'm going to keep a lot of the horror also. Everything on this shelf is staying. But just as far as what's stored in other places, a lot is going to go. And a lot of the things that are going are things like, well, for example, books that I don't really need physical copies of, or that would be easily replaced. There are hundreds of books that I actually have as ebooks. And while it is entirely possible that sometime during my next, say, 25 or 30 years of life, whatever I have left, it's entirely possible something can happen to wipe out my ebook library. You never know about that sort of thing. But even if that happens, are these books that are easily replaceable? Even if that happens. So let's take books like this. This is a Wordsworth Classics edition of Bleak House by Charles Dickens. I have not read this book yet. I fully intend to read this book at some point. But do I need this physical copy of this book in my house? Do I need it? This is in the public domain, so it's easily, obtainable if you have any kind of device. I've got e-readers. I have an e-copy of this. I probably have more than one. But even if those e-copies somehow vanished, they would be pretty easy to get back, right? Because it's in the public domain. And even if that were impossible, Bleak House is not a difficult book to replace if somehow I decided I needed to read a physical copy. I don't know why that would be, but if I really needed a physical copy of it, it's easy to get back. So why do I even have it in my house if it's completely unnecessary? I have hundreds of books like this. Classics or older books that I don't really need physical copies of because they are so easy to replace, or I have ebook copies of them. So I don't need, I like Charles Dickens, but I don't love Charles Dickens, so, it's not necessary for me to have this. This is not something I need. This is probably something that should go. So it's going to go along with, like I said, hundreds of other books that are a lot like this. On the other hand, for like a true classic of literature like this book is not so easy to replace. I could replace it, but it's out of print. It's Star Trek. So, I can't, I'm not going to get rid of this, obviously. You have to draw the line somewhere. And so, this book, for example, I would not get rid of, right? Because, it might be difficult to replace this book. And it's Star Trek. So, obviously, this is staying, along with all my vintage science fiction and a lot of horror and a lot of stuff like that. And then there are a lot of other books, so many that it is embarrassing, that I have had in my library for literally decades that I will never read. And I know I'll never read them. Am I going to read these books in the next 30 years? Probably not ever. And I've continued to pick these books up, even though there's no reason. And a good example is this book, which I picked up at a Little Free Library just because I could. This is Julian Fellowes' Belgravia, from the creator of Downton Abbey. I like Downton Abbey. Downton Abbey was good, right, Roger? Roger agrees. But I can guarantee you, I am never, ever going to read Belgravia by Julian Fellowes. It's never going to happen. There will always be other books that I want to read more than this. Always. Always. I can't even imagine a scenario or a reading event or anything where it's like, oh, I've got Belgravia by Julian Fellowes. Thank goodness I have that book. Probably not. So this is just something I picked up on a whim because it was free and just stuffed it with all the bazillion other books. Bazillion, that's an actual number. Roger's good at math. He says bazillion is a real number. So I'll put this with the bazillion other books that I don't need at all. At all. And get rid of it. I have so many books to get rid of. Which leaves me with the actual task of getting rid of 1,000 books. More than 1,000 books. This is going to be difficult, and there are different ways you can do it. You could sell them as lots on eBay. But that would require, packing them up and taking to the post office, which, doubtless I will do with some of those. And you know, it requires a certain amount of effort. These are not books that are like, ooh, you know, this is, I can't believe you're getting, no, a lot of these books are just, like I said, books like this, relatively common books that are easy to replace and are nothing super special. You know, or books that I've read. There are a lot of books that I've read and enjoyed, but I'm certain I will never read again, you know. There are a lot of those books too, a lot of those. So that is my next challenge, actually removing the books from my house. That is the difficult part. I've pretty much done the, okay, what is leaving bit. Now it's the actual, how am I going to get rid of all of this stuff? So we will see. That is our next challenge. But yeah, a lot of books are leaving. A lot of books are leaving. And like I said, one of the reasons that I have hesitated on doing this, or just put it off, is because of the 500 book challenge. And the thought that, you know, I need all those books just in case, you know, I don't actually. If you just, you know, a basic, like Roger knows math. He knows that I can get rid of over 1,000 books and still have enough to cover the challenge. But it might make it more challenging. We will see. We will see how all that rolls out. I think I'm safe though, because I definitely have over 500 books that are just vintage science fiction alone. And then I have a lot of horror that's not leaving. And I do have a lot of books that aren't leaving. So I think I should be fine. I think I should be fine on that. We will see how things shake out. But definitely, it's a necessary thing. For one thing, I'm not the only one that lives in this house. There are other people in the house now. And, you know, you must be courteous and not have books everywhere that you're not going to read. So, yeah, have to take care of that business. So, yeah, the Great Unhaul, as I referred to it earlier, when I used to talk about this, it is back on, and it is happening. It is happening now. So yeah, I thought I'd talk about it because I always talk about stuff like this. Anyway, I'll shut up now. I've gone on long enough about getting rid of books. I will catch you next time.